Hello, Michele. How are you? Where are you?
Hi, Jenny. I'm fine. I'm in Vancouver right now. It's my last day of quarantine, and I'm visiting family. But yeah, normally I'm based in London, so this is just an extra long trip because of the quarantine. But yeah, it's a beautiful day though.
We're all having to get used to a bit of that, aren't we? Well, I'm
Exactly.
here in Bath. I'm in the Art Salon. We've got some of your pieces that are in your upcoming catalogue, actually, that I'd love to just ask you a few questions about today, if I may.
That sounds fine. Yeah.
Glass is different, and lots of people don't know how we get from A to Z with glass. How does it all come about? So if you don't mind, can you take me to your studio right now? It's first thing in the morning, you've just got to your studio. How do you start building a piece of art, creating a piece of art that's made of glass? How does that work?
Well, I think you go through lots of different stages, and I start off. I'm from a painting, printmaking background, and I start off with drawings. I do lots of drawings and paintings based mainly on natural materials. So I love looking at plant forms and their shapes and how they change. And then I start working these, refining these into just plain, just, well, yeah, shapes, but sort of organic shapes, which I then work out in a 3D way with using clay and just doing a coiled kind of clay model of it, which I use as maquettes. And I start working, if I'm working on a series of shapes, I work them all out in clay or something like that. And then I go into a hot shop and start making them larger or changing, sort of working them out in glass. So you have the shape, because each of those pieces are all hand formed, so there's no molds used in them. They're all sort of molded by hand while they're still sort of hot, and so you have to sometimes make quite quick decisions in when you stop working them, sort of thing. So but it's exciting working with glass. It's you just get, there's a constant surprise element every time you think you're going to get what you plan out of the kiln, and you open the door and you get something. Sometimes it's what you've pre-thought it would look like, but other times it looks completely, you get a different kind of color movement. so it's always
a little bit of mystery.
Yes, yeah, mystery, and it just keeps you constantly on your toes, and you're always exploring new territory with it.
So may I take you just briefly back to you're in your studio and you're designing. You said there that you make sort of clay maquettes of where you think you're going to go, but you said in groupings. What do you mean by groupings? What do you mean by that?
I quite like putting, like, as you see with the sort of burgundy vessels on your right,
on the end, yeah.
my right, your left. I quite like the pieces to kind of interact with each other, and it's almost like they're having a conversation with one another, or they're somehow linked. And so I like putting them, I work out these shapes ahead of time, and then I sort of they just kind of create a movement when they're together, and there's a kind of dialogue built with those pieces. But they also work on their own, but there's something nice there's a relationship between them.
Yes, sort of more installation pieces when you've got dialogue of group. I mean, even if it's just two or three or more, it's that interaction, that sort of.
Yeah, it's more of a statement. It expresses something when you walk into a room and you see a few of them together, and they're sort of somehow, just relating to one another or interacting.
So, are you quite? I mean, they can be sold singly and they can be sold together. But when they are together, are you? Is it important that they're positioned in a certain way, or do you allow the person to make it speak their, whatever language they want to speak? Is it?
I think it's important it should speak the language of the person who has it. So what's nice, what I'm drawn to with glass is the interchangeableness of it. And I think once they're finished, they should still carry on changing. And that's the other brilliant thing about glass, is the way light affects it. So you can also change which area of a room you'd put them in, and if it's by the window, and how the dramatic change light has to a form.
Yes, that's very true. And in the design stage, when you are back making those groupings, are you thinking about color at that stage, or is it just the shapes and forms at this point?
It's mainly the shapes and forms. Color, is intuitive to me. My background's in textile, so I've previously used to like dye lots of silks and hand screen print them. And so I've always got color in the background, and I work out in my sketches, my color combinations and things. But when I'm working with clay, it's more just working on the form, because form is quite new to me. I've only been working with form for about 6 years. And it's just interesting. That's why I have to work them out with clay, because from a drawing, you've got so many different angles to the glass. And
because I don't know if it's, I'm going to go and grab one of these pieces quickly.
Okay.
Let's say I take this one. I don't know if you can see, but for the viewer, they can see that it's quite flat on that angle. It's quite, I mean, there is a real sense of movement all the way around.
Yeah, I like capturing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Place that very carefully. There is two very definite different styles, even to someone that doesn't necessarily know glass here. There's these pieces here that have got shapes and forms throughout the glass, as well as the sweep and movement, and they've got more solid color here. Tell me, there's technical names, isn't there? And there's
yes. So the two with the kind of pattern on them, those are a growl technique. So it's a Swedish technique, classic technique, where you basically cut through layers of colored glass, and you cut through it to so you get the two colors showing through, and it allows you to have a pattern on the glass, or a pictorial side. Yeah.
So you can see.
So those are, apart from just the pattern, the difference between those pieces and the other vessels is the fact that the color's on the outside of the glass. So you have to, in order to get that, it's a two-part process in making it. So you start off with, you make a clear bubble, and you connect it to a cup of color. I've drawn a little diagram to show you.
Yes, brilliant. Oh, I see. Yes.
Anti-iron, and then showing that where the color's attached. And it's basically, so the color, you have to flip the colors over the clear bubble, so the color is on the outside, and then you anneal that for 24 hours, and it turns out to be a cup like this of color.
Okay.
That's the size of it before I start cutting it. Once it's annealed, I mark out where my markings are going to go, my pattern, my drawings, and mark it out on there. And then I use diamond engraving wheels to cut through. So you use a lathe, and I just work that into a...
And that way. So that is the stage before this one.
Yes, that's the stage before this. This one has opaque color on the outside. This is my choice, how I like to work. People use it in different ways. And and then there's a transparent color on the inside, and then clear. I really like cutting right through all the color and getting to the clear to make it so you get a more watery, permeable kind of effect.
Yeah.
Those ones have been lensed, so I quite like trying to achieve different marks with those pieces. So I've lensed through. The lensing, you get more of a softer, sort of a charcoal feeling, and it also gives you a viewpoint to when you're looking at it closely. You can look through from one side to the other, and the background also shows through. The other thing I like working with vessels is that the fact that it's important for me to get as much light into the piece. So I like having the opening at the top. So
this bit here.
Yes. So I just think what's so great about glass is just the effects light has to it and how they, influence and change the piece. So
they sort of live with light, don't they?
Exactly. And they also change by the day. So what's one color in one part of the day looks completely different at dusk. And so you have a constantly changing piece of artwork in your home, potentially.
Well, it is, isn't it? I mean, the evening light, or when you've got, lamps, table lamps, that sort of level light, and then you've got the overhead light, and then the sunshine or the daylight in the day. It does change throughout the day, so they sort of live with you, as it were.
Yes, yeah.
They sort of take on their own life. But so these pieces, the color is on the inside.
Yes, so those pieces are just, they only take one glass blowing day to work out, rather than those ones which can take up to a couple of weeks to make.
Yeah.
Those ones that's, so basically the colors on the inside, and you start off with a bubble and you add the color to it. And no, actually, sorry, I've got that wrong.
Okay.
You start off with the color and you add the clear to it.
Right.
So unlike ceramics, which you start off with the form and you add the color after it's been fired, with these glass pieces, the color is the first thing you start with when you're actually blowing the glass. And so how you the different the different timings of and amounts of color you use are really important to how they move in the glass. And it was one of the things I studied when I was doing my MA. I did a lot of research on color movement, and some colors move faster than others. Some are soft, some are hard. And I just quite liked experimenting with the different combinations and how they affect each other, because some colors aren't compatible. So if you put them together, they crack when you take them out of the kiln.
Right.
Yeah, so those ones are quite different, but I love the kind of softness you get with that. And it just reminds me of sort of like horizontal lines and
yeah, I think I mean, that was one of the questions I was about to ask you. What does Michele do outside of Hot Shop and studio? What's your inspiration? Where do you, I mean, your colors are beautiful, and a lot of them are very sort of naturally based, as in the colors that you see in the country. Or
thank you. Yes, well that's right. I'm very inspired by nature. I've always been, from textiles to glass. I've always looked at nature as to express I express my work through looking at nature. I don't know. And I'd like walking and hiking, and I tend to collect lots of bits and pieces I see on the way, like driftwood and weathered stones. And I quite like the transition of nature. So when you see something that's kind of growing, and then as it starts to decay, you get pieces that are kind of frozen in their motion. So like, for instance, like tulip petals, they just kind of seem, if you have a bunch of tulips and they just sort of freeze as if the wind's just blown them. And then you get these really interesting shapes. And that's what I base a lot of those vessel shapes on, kind of like twist and, so it's a lot to do with motion and transition, but, and the colors are all, beautiful plant life and flowers and
so
things.
There's quite a lot of facets that you wrap up into one final piece. You've got the actual sort of physicality, the physical movement of the piece, the way it twists and turns, the actual structure of it.
Yes.
Colour that also it undulates, or it merges in and merges up, or sometimes you leave the clear glass at the bottom so they look like they're going to float.
Yeah.
There's scope for a lot to go wrong there, Michele, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think with glass, you just know, I mean, it's the material, it lends itself to breakage. And I think also you have to get, it has to be annealed for 24 hours. So it needs to, after you make it, it has to go into a kiln at a controlled temperature. And each stage you have to lower it and for a certain amount of hours. But with the colors that can, if the colors don't work together, they'll crack. So, and the twists don't always work in the right way. So yeah, lots can go wrong.
So if someone's commissioning a piece, I mean, you can't guarantee exactly how it's going to look.
You generally have to do a number of pieces to get
specific
what you want. So, I mean, even though, after the planning process and you're in the hot shop, a piece doesn't necessarily take so long to make once you're in the hot shop, but then, you have to do a number of them to get the piece that works the best, sort of thing. So,
but arguably it takes the length of time to make a piece from the moment that you pick your pencil up.
Exactly. And also all the years you've been
yeah, it's
on it.
Well, I think they're an absolutely beautiful collection that we've got here, and I am looking forward to the next that's coming out of you. And now you've got a new studio. That usually means that you're going to push your luck with something. You're going to push something technically or design.
Yeah.
What's your sort of future hopes in your new studio?
Well, I've got lots of ideas brewing since I've been in lockdown. And I've been doing lots of drawing and painting. But when I get to the studio, I'm going to start working with doing some cast work, so I could actually do it within the space I'm in. And that involves making molds from some of my found objects. I shouldn't say objects, found plant material. And making molds from those and then casting them with glass, and those usually take a number of days to cast. But I've just got lots of ideas. I'm also going to, I mean, I love doing the blown glass, so I'll be doing some molds that I can blow into, and just trying out new things.
Well, it's a medium that can be pushed in all sorts of different directions, I mean, even just with these two different processes that we've got here. So as an artist, it must be quite satisfying because you've got that constant challenge of
exactly. It's constant. It's endless possibilities you could work with glass. I think the problem is actually focusing on on one aspect of it. Otherwise, you can sometimes make pieces that just have too much going on in them. It's good to kind of keep, somehow distill your ideas into sort of a single area, so you kind of don't overwork a piece.
That's why the studio must be so important to you, because that's where you have to focus it down and take the time to make the groupings work, make the time, to refine the vessel to the point that you can do before you get to that hot shop. So I mean, a lot of time must be spent in the studio as much as physically manipulating the glass.
Oh, definitely. I'd say there's probably more time spent in the studio planning than actually. Well, yeah. I mean, it's hand in hand, really. Basically, it's hard to kind of work. I often get asked, how long does a piece take to make, and you just kind of feel like, how long's a ball of string? It's not about the actual finishing of one piece. It's about all the kind of, the journey you took to get to that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends what specific piece. If it's a more simple form or the one you've done many times, I suppose it can be done more quickly. If it's a whole new, technically challenging piece or something that you're working, pushing something really extraordinary, then it's going to take a lot longer, isn't it? So
I don't really repeat shapes. I mean, they're not easily repeatable. You can repeat them up to a certain point, but because I don't use molds, it's sort of you have to, they're always each piece is unique. They're always gonna have a kind of change, a difference.
Exciting. You never know.
Yes.
Open the little box of goodies and who knows. Michele, it's been an absolute delight talking to you today, as always. Thank you for explaining so clearly how the process works. It's as fascinating to look at as it is to hear about the sort of technicalities behind it. So Thank you. I'm glad you're in quarantine and we've managed to snatch a few minutes.
Yes, no, thank you. Thanks.
I look forward to seeing what's coming next. Thank you.
Yes, me
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Okay, bye.